Friday, 5 p.m. Jerusalem time from NBC Studios. This is NBC Journal with Bassam Zahir and Sana Abu Samra.
Teen critically injured after being run over by a Jewish settler.
Palestinian prisoners shelve planned mass hunger strike in Israel's jails.
Three-story building in Bethlehem area demolished.
Hello and welcome again. A teenager was critically injured today after he was run over by a Jewish settler with his vehicle to the east of Yatta town in the south of the occupied West Bank, according to local and Palestinian security sources. Israeli settler was driving his car near the village when he intentionally ran over Aysar Mahmoud Hushayya, 15, and critically injured him. He was moved to a hospital for treatment. The settler repeatedly attempted a run over other Palestinian pedestrians present at the scene and he ran away. There was no comment from Israeli authorities on the attack.
At least 84 Palestinians were injured, 5 of them seriously, on Friday as Israeli forces attacked hundreds of protesters taking part in the weekly Great March of Return protests at Gaza-Israel border, according to the Ministry of Health. The forces fired live bullets and rubber-coated steel rounds at the protesters who gathered at many encampments along the border, injuring 83 protesters by live bullets, 5 of them critically. Some of the wounded were moved to hospital and others were treated in the field hospitals. More than 250 Palestinians have been killed and over 23,000 others injured by Israeli forces since the outbreak of the Great March of Return protests at Gaza border on March 30th, 2018.
Sheikh Abdul Azim Salhab, chairman of the Waqf Council in Jerusalem, returned to Al-Aqsa Mosque on Sunday after being a 40-day ban on Israeli occupation authorities. On March 2nd, Israeli police handed Salhab an order banning him from being in Al-Aqsa Mosque compound for 40 days against the backup drop of the reopening Bab al-Rahma building inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, which had been closed for 16 years.
Israeli occupation authorities detained more than 6,000 Palestinian children since 2015, according to the Palestinian Prisoners Society. PPS said in a statement marking the Palestinian Children's Day, which coincided on Friday, that 98% of the children held had been subjected to psychological and/or physical abuse while in Israeli custody. It said dozens of minors were detained by Israeli troops after being shot and wounded by the troops. Children living in occupied East Jerusalem are the most targeted, with dozens facing arrests more than one time in a month, particularly during periods of heightened tensions, such as the Bab al-Rahma protests in March. PPS added, minors arrested during night raids are transferred to interrogation and detention centers where they suffer abuses, including being deprived of food or water for hours.
Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails Sunday shelved their planned mass hunger strike in protest of the deteriorating conditions. Chairman of the Prisoners Affairs Commission, Qadri Abu Bakr, said the prisoners have postponed their planned open-ended hunger strike following progress in dialogue with the Israeli prison service, which culminated in the realization of some of the prisoners' demands. Abu Bakr added that the dialogue was ongoing between the prisoners' representatives and the IPS over the prisoners' demands, and that our final decision on the planned hunger strike would be announced immediately following the conclusion of the dialogue. He pointed out that the IPS has agreed to install payphones in the jails, noting that the number of payphones and their locations inside jails would be determined by dialogue. He said that the IPS has also agreed to release the prisoners being held in solitary confinement over their involvement in recent confrontations with the wardens, while the dialogue was ongoing over resident family visits ban.
A 20 million package has been approved by the Administrative Committee of Al-Aqsa and Al-Quds funds for development programs in occupied East Jerusalem. Nasser Qatami, Palestine's representative in the Administrative Committee, said following the committee meeting today in Rabat, Morocco. He said that the two funds managed by the Islamic Development Bank wanted to send a message of support for the Palestinians in occupied Jerusalem who are facing Israeli measures aimed at destroying their economy and development in their city. The money will go for projects in local government, education and economic empowerment to fight poverty and unemployment in the city. He also said Saudi Arabia has also asked the IDP to manage its $150 million fund it has pledged during the Arab Summit last year to support the Islamic Waqf Department in Jerusalem in its battle to protect Arab property in the city from takeover by Israel and its settlers.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates expressed surprise at the silence of the world community regarding what it said were Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people, saying the Palestinians are about to lose faith in the ability of United Nations to provide it with protection from the brutality of the Israeli occupation. We are very surprised at the silence of the international community on such crimes and the indifference countries exhibit towards the life of the Palestinian citizens, said the ministry in a statement in which it strongly condemned an Israeli settler killing of a Palestinian earlier in the north of the West Bank. Mohammed Abdel Fattah, 23, was shot and killed, and another Palestinian was injured when a settler opened fire at them in a busy intersection south of city of Nablus. The ministry held the Israeli government fully responsible for the crimes of the settlers and the provocative assaults by organized groups known to the occupying state in the security forces, which receive training and are armed in the open by the occupation forces, and which commit the most hideous crimes against our people, their land, property, and holy places, without these forces doing anything regarding this, rather than cover and support their activities while providing them with political and security umbrella.
Presidential spokesman Nabil Abu Rudaina slammed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's recent remarks on Gaza as revealing the magnitude of the conspiracy of the so-called deal of the century. He said in a statement that Netanyahu's remarks, in which he said that one option for Gaza is to turn it over to another country, and that he talked to many Arab leaders but none agreed to this, which indicates that the magnitude of the conspiracy of the deal of the century, which, if implemented, will be as much conspiracy against the Arab countries as it is against. He said Presidential Mahmoud Abbas has constantly warned against this, hence his refusal to relinquish Jerusalem, which is the cornerstone that will safeguard the Palestinians and Arab international interests. Abu Rudaina went on to call on Hamas movement to fully fathom what is being planned for it to be part of the so-called deal of the century, which would result in the Judization of Jerusalem, the liquidization of the Palestinian identity, and relinquishing freedom and independence. He reaffirmed President Abbas and the Palestinian leadership's position that there will not be a state in Gaza, nor a state without Gaza, and not without Jerusalem.
Boulders of the Israeli municipality of West in Jerusalem demolished a two-story Palestinian-owned building in Shu'afat refugee camp in the occupied city of Jerusalem. Large unit of Israeli forces raided the camp as a surveillance plane flew overhead while the bulldozers proceeded to demolish buildings owned by a Hoshia family. The house was built near the apartheid wall which separates the camp from the illegal Israeli settlement of Bizghat Siv.
Israel demolished a three-story Palestinian-owned building in the Bethlehem area village of Beir Auna under the pretext it was built without a permit, according to Hassan Brejia from the Anti-War Anti-Settlement Committee in Bethlehem. An Israeli force raided the area as a bulldozer proceeded to demolish the building owned by Bassem Isa, a lawyer. He said that Israel has recently intensified demolition of Palestinian homes in Beir Auna, a sparsely populated West Bank area, most of which has been annexed to nearby Jerusalem.
Two Palestinian miners from occupied East Jerusalem said they were severely beaten when they were detained by special Israeli forces. The Palestinian Prisoners Commission said today, it said Mohammed Abu Isnaina, 15, and Qais Basiti, 17, told the commission that they were thrown to the ground when they were detained in the Plaza of Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem's Old City. They were also kicked and punished and beaten with rifle butts after they were taken to the Russian compound police station in West Jerusalem, where they were abused verbally and interrogated several times to force them to confess to charges levied against them.
Israeli settlers threw rocks at Palestinian vehicles near the illegal Israeli settlement of Halamish west to the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah, according to witnesses. Athir Shqir from the Zawiya village said that 15 settlers attacked her car, attempting to stop her, and attacked her before she was able to get away unharmed. He added another group of settlers was throwing rocks at other vehicles traveling on the same road ahead of her. Israeli occupation forces are often present in the area where an army observation tower is located, but none intervened to keep the settlers from harming the Palestinian civilians, she said.
A school in Khilat al-Dibi in the south of the West Bank is under constant threat of demolition after an Israeli occupation force came to the school today and took pictures of it and other homes in the area, according to Ratib al-Jabur, a local activist. Al-Jabur said occupation forces raided Khilat al-Dibi village located in Area C of the West Bank and took pictures of the school and several homes for the Babsi family in what is believed to be a prelude of the demolition structures under the pretext they were built without a permit. Israel has already demolished a school once in July and its furniture later seized, but it was rebuilt by the village residents and the Palestinian Ministry of Education in clear defiance of the Israeli measure.
A number of Palestinians were hurt after Israeli occupation forces threw tear gas grenades at them as they went on a nature hike in the northern Jordan Valley, and 7 were arrested, according to a local official. Mu'taz Bsharat from the Tubas Governorate said the occupation forces fired tear gas canisters, stun grenades, and attacked the Palestinian hikers as they walked a track that passes near an illegal Israeli settlement, and arrested 7 hikers, including 2 women. The track starts from the Ain Hilwa area and goes through areas targeted by settlers on a daily basis.
Israeli Navy attacked Palestinian fishing boats while sailing 3 nautical miles off Gaza City coast. The Israeli Navy opened fire and sprayed the fishermen with water, forcing them to leave the area before they could do any serious fishing. The fishermen refuted Israeli claims that they are allowed to sail up to 6 nautical miles of the coast, stressing that the Israeli Navy targets them almost daily and does not allow them to go further than 3 nautical miles, which the fishermen say is not enough to catch fish.
Israeli occupation authorities imposed a gender closure of the West Bank and of all border crossings with the Gaza Strip on the election day, April the 9th. Accordingly, West Bank and Gaza crossings with Israel will be sealed, and entry to Israel for all Israeli-issued permit holders will be banned, except for humanitarian and medical eases. Israel regularly imposes severe restrictions on Palestinian movement during elections and on Jewish holidays under the guise of security. Israel's imposition of closures on the Palestinian territory has severely affected the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who depend on entering Israel for employment opportunities.
The so-called Israeli Higher Planning Committee approved on Saturday evening the construction of 770 new housing units in the illegal settlement of Bitar Elit, west of Beit Lahem in the occupied West Bank, according to the colonization of the Wall Resistance Commission. The Colonization Wall Resistance Commission Director in Beit Lahem, Hassan Bourjriya, told Wafa that the approval comes only a few days after Israeli okayed the construction of 70 housing units in the nearby illegal Maqsad settlement. Between 500,000 and 600,000 Israelis live in Jewish-only settlements across occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank in the violation of international law. All settlements across the West Bank are illegal under international law, particularly Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention, which establishes that the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population in the territory it occupies.
Outgoing Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah, and in his capacity as Minister of Interior, issued strict orders to the Palestinian security official to ban the use of weapons in any kind of celebration. Hamdallah sent a letter to General Ismail Jabir, the President's advisor on the district's affairs, instructing him to inform all governors in Palestine to work with the security forces in banning the use of weapons in the celebrations, stressing taking legal actions against anyone involved in the shooting, regardless who that person is. Ministry of Interior spokesman Ghassan Nimr said that there were many incidents as a result of shooting during celebrations that included deaths and injuries of innocent bystanders.
A Palestinian sustained injuries on Monday overnight after Israeli settlers stormed Jibayya village north of Ramallah city and hurled stones at villagers. Deputy Mayor of Jibayya, Fakhruddin Shalash, told Wafa that a group of settlers stormed the village and hurled stones at villagers, lightly injuring a villager in his head. Settler violence against Palestinians on their property is routine in the West Bank and is rarely prosecuted by Israeli authorities. Settlers' violence includes property and mosque arsons, stone throwing, uprooting of crops and olive trees, attacks on vulnerable homes. Among others, Israeli imposes harsh penalties on Palestinian stone throwers as it passed a legislation in 2015 allowing for up to 20 years in prison if charged with throwing stones at Israeli vehicles, and a minimum of 3 years for the act of throwing a stone at an Israeli. In contrast, Israeli settlers are rarely prosecuted under the same standards of the law. Between 500,000 and 600,000 Israelis live in Jewish-only settlements across occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank in violation of international law.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel used force wisely in the Gaza Strip as Israeli occupation forces have killed more than 300 Palestinians near the eastern fence of the besieged enclave. In an interview with Israel Hayom, Netanyahu said more than 300 Palestinians have been killed near the border when they tried to breach the fence and abduct our soldiers. We have used force wisely and powerfully. Netanyahu also said that his government's policy led Hamas, the ruler of the besieged strip, to suffer the severest economic crisis. They, or the Gazans, are in an enormous economic distress, and Hamas is in check and wants some quiet so it can stand up to the huge pressure in Gaza, he said. And now moving to An-Najah National University news.
An-Najah professor participates in the 13th Göttingen meeting of the German Neuroscience Society. Dr. Bilal Rahal, director of the Biomedical Science Department at the An-Najah National University, has recently participated in the 13th Göttingen meeting of the German Neuroscience Society, which has been held in Göttingen, Germany from March 20th to March 23, 2019. Dr. Rahal presented a research paper titled TGF Regulates by the Development of Serotonergic Neuron Subgroups, Evidence from Mutant Mice, through which he shed light on the effect of certain proteins on the neuron's evolution in the human brain. The conference covered various topics in neuroscience, including the evolution and development of neurons and its relation to the most common neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. At the end of the visit, An-Najah professor visited the German Heart Center, Berlin, and discussed possible means of mutual cooperation between both parties to build further relations with the university.
An-Najah receives H.E. Mr. Pierre Cochard, the Consul General of France in Jerusalem. Professor Maher Netche, acting president of An-Najah University, and Dr. Khairy Sos, An-Najah's vice president for international development and external affairs, hosted H.E. Mr. Pierre Cochard, Consul General of the French Consulate General Jerusalem, to promote mutual cooperation in the field of academia between An-Najah and French universities. Professor Maher Netche thanked Mr. Cochard and commended the consulate's role in creating ties and facilitating academic exchanges between An-Najah and French universities. He briefed Mr. Cochard on An-Najah's history, academic development and programs, as well as the various specializations it offers and its scientific centers. He also talked about the financial and political obstacles that higher education in Palestine faces in terms of attracting international students and staff to Palestinian universities. In turn, Dr. Assas welcomed the guest and mentioned that many of An-Najah's professors benefited from French scholarship programs and got their PhD degrees from French universities. These are the news of the week. Thank you for watching. For more details, visit our website nn.ps.
See you next Friday.